Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Ahmet Davutoğlu made a press statement today in Ankara where he announced his resignations from the Justice and Development Party. Medyascope correspondents Batu Bozkürk and Okan Yücel were in Ankara today to cover the press conference.
Hello from the office of former Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu in Ankara. Davutoğlu has resigned from Justice and Development Party with a press conference held here. The reason for this resignation has emerged in last 3 years. When Recep Tayyip Erdoğan was elected as president in 2014, Ahmet Davutoğlu became the second leader of Justice and Development Party and also the Prime Minister of Turkey. However, his mission lasted less than 2 years. In 2016, Pelican files were publicized, which referred to conflicts between Erdoğan and Davutoğlu. Davutoğlu resigned as the leader of the party. On April 22 this year, he published a 15-page manifesto. He criticized the new presidential system, emphasized on rule of law, and stated that Justice and Development Party can no longer create solutions for problems. It was interpreted as first sign of breakup. In last 5 months, he went to different cities to meet people. He also attended TV programs where he continued to criticize the policies of Justice and Development Party. In last week, JDP sent Davutoğlu to a disciplinary board for dismissal. He was accused of spreading fake news in public, slandering, insulting and humiliating the party or party executives. Today in his office, he said, "We resign from our party to prevent our supporters from seeing their own chairman being dismissed." He also stated that they will start a new political movement and invited all fractions to this new movement. These mean Ankara will have a busy agenda in the following days.
Ali Babacan spoke to conservative newspaper Karar and revealed important details regarding the establishment of his new party, aimed to be formed before 2020.
Ali Babacan, former deputy prime minister in charge of the economy and a founding member of the AKP, broke his silence regarding rumors that he was in the midst of launching his own political party. In an interview conducted with Karar newspaper, Babacan stated, "It will take a bit of time. The quality is very important." In the interview, Babacan contrasted his legacy with the current state of the Turkish economy. He said the biggest problem in the country's economy was the lack of predictability. The reputation and trustworthiness of institutions, especially their independence, needs to be strengthened, he said. Monetary policy, fiscal policy, and macro-prudential measures must be harmonious and predictable. Structural reforms must be revived. He said, however, that Turkey's most serious problem was not the economy, but freedoms and justice. He said the AKP used to support human rights, freedoms, pluralistic democracy, and the rule of law, but had deviated from these values. After all of these successes, the situation that Turkey is now in really saddens us, he said. He said he had been taking advice from former President Abdullah Gül, who co-founded the AKP, but later fell out with Mr. Erdoğan. Mr. Babacan said that while Mr. Gül was giving full support to the breakaway movement, he would not join the new party because he did not believe that it was right to come under the roof of a political party after occupying the independent position of president. In addition, the former foreign minister and prime minister Ahmet Davutoğlu is also preparing to form a new party separately from Babacan. These two former close associates of Erdoğan are expected to address different political constituencies in Turkey. Babacan resigned from the AKP in July 2019 because of differences with the party's leadership regarding the management of the economy. Ahmet Davutoğlu's name has been put forward to a disciplinary board for dismissal as a result of the unanimous vote by the Executive Committee of the Justice.
Our guest this evening is Suat Kınıklıoğlu, a former member of the Turkish Parliament. He's here with us tonight to speak about the recent developments regarding Ali Babacan and Ahmet Davutoğlu's new party initiatives. Good evening, Mr. Kınıklıoğlu.
Good evening.
Hello?
Good evening.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Now, we can say for sure after the resignation of Ahmet Davutoğlu today that there are two new parties on the way. Could you, you've worked both with Babacan and Davutoğlu in the past. Could you tell us in what ways they are similar and in what ways they differ? Because Babacan has stated in his recent interview that him and Davutoğlu were different in terms of priorities, methods, and approaches when it comes to politics. What did he mean by that?
Well, these are two men with very different stories. And I think the way they have been handling their new positions throughout the last couple of months demonstrates clearly that they are aiming at different audiences. I think Mr. Davutoğlu is more interested in capturing the traditional AKP vote and the AKP base. As a former chairman of the party, foreign minister and prime minister, I think also his personality and his lifestyle, it appears to be more aimed at the traditional AKP base. I think Davutoğlu also knows he's not very popular beyond the AKP base due to his views and his policies, particularly on Syria. Babacan, on the other hand, I think from the very beginning has been underlining that it's not about him. It's really a cadre party, as we say in Turkish. It's more of a team effort, and that even in his latest interview, he underlined that he couldn't go into much detail before consulting with the people he has been together in launching the party. So, that said, both of these parties have not been formed yet, and apart from the 5 people we've seen today behind Mr. Davutoğlu, we don't really have a lot of information of who is involved, and more importantly, what kind of program these parties will have. So I think it's rather premature to make judgments about them. But I think from what we've heard so far, and we certainly have heard more from Davutoğlu than Babacan, I think this is sort of the rough sort of sketching, where 2 men with different stories, and of course I must underline, Mr. Babacan, of course, has a very positive record when it comes to the economy. He's very much liked in international circles in Istanbul, by the business community in Istanbul, etc. So he comes, both men come with different baggages to this, and we will see how that will play out in the coming month.
Yes, you mentioned that Davutoğlu and Babacan had 2 very different public personas as well. Why do you think Mr. Babacan broke his silence at this particular time?
I think the Babacan team may not be admitting this, but I think they are somewhat forced by Davutoğlu's activism and Davutoğlu's frequent meetings, gatherings, and announcements. So I think Davutoğlu has been capturing the early frustrations within the party better because he's been out, he's been more in detail about what he is up to. And I think today, for the first time, with some other people who used to be in the party resigning with them together, I think was rather an important and bold step. I think the Davutoğlu team is somewhat conditioned by Davutoğlu's activism, so they felt they shouldn't be left behind. And I think there was a lot of pressure on them that Babacan should come out and speak. So I think that's why he decided to speak to the Karar paper, which was a long interview, but I think it was not as detailed or as specific as many people hoped it would be.
Mm-hmm. And President Erdogan has previously spoken out about people leaving the party. He's talked about them as such as traitors. What do you think, what kind of strategies will Erdogan develop to combat Babacan and Davutoğlu? Do you think he will try to stop them somehow?
Yes, I think part of our political culture is that those who are in government use all of the government's capacities, including intelligence and the police, etc., to combat potential opponents. So we probably will see, or it's probably already started, to sabotage these movements, either by discouraging people who might join them, or using the media or the social media to discredit them. So this is unfortunately part of Turkey's political culture, and we are likely going to see this happen, especially if any of these movements, or both of them collectively, will seem to gain traction in the public, but more importantly, within the AKP base. I mean, we don't have really a lot of reliable data on what these movements might be able to achieve because, as I said earlier, they're not even officially formed yet, and we don't even know what kind of platform or what kind of personalities are involved.
Well, both Davutoğlu and Babacan have mentioned that Turkey's biggest problem was related to freedoms and justice. Do you think they will both be able to face their pasts in order to speak to constituents outside of the AKP?
I think Mr. Babacan is somewhat more luckier in that regard because he has a pretty good track record when it comes to the economy. Mr. Babacan has also a clean record in, so does Davutoğlu, by the way, a very clean track record on corruption or any of those dealings that some members of the AKP were part of. So they both are successful from the conservative voters' perspective. I'm not talking about the overall, but from the conservative voters' perspective, both of them were successful men. The problem with Davutoğlu is, of course, he carries the Syria baggage, which means refugees, a lot of resources being spent on a war that many people opposed, and also a lot of false promises early on, especially about the war and how it actually played out. So I think Mr. Davutoğlu will have a harder time to convince audiences beyond the traditional AKP base. While Babacan will benefit from the fact that Turkey is in a very dire economic crisis and people are looking forward to get out of it. So in that respect, Mr. Babacan has an advantage over Davutoğlu, that he has a better story to talk about, to tell, and secondly, he can promise something more concrete in terms of the economy and back to normality in Turkish politics.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kınıklıoğlu, for your insights on these recent developments.
Well, thanks for having me.
Now for our next news video. President Erdoğan met with municipal mayors at the presidential complex in Ankara on September 11. Mayors from the ruling Justice and Development Party, Nationalist Movement Party, and the main opposition Republican and People's Party attended the meeting, which marked the first time Erdoğan has met all 29 mayors since the March 31 local elections. Erdoğan called for mayors from throughout the country to unite for Turkey.
I'm pleased to be with mayors who keep a distance from terrorism, terror groups, and lawlessness, stated President Erdoğan when addressing the municipal mayors. Erdoğan's meeting with the country's metropolitan mayors follows the ousting of 3 mayors in Turkey's southeast over terror links. The dismissal of the mayors of Diyarbakır, Van, and Mardin provinces sparked nationwide protests and international condemnation. Erdoğan congratulated the mayors for their success in the March 31st local elections and praised them for their part in the picture of Turkey's democracy and freedom. AKP lost 5 of the country's most populous provinces in the March 31st local elections to the main opposition CHP, including Istanbul and Ankara. Erdoğan further pointed out that the picture of unity emerging from the event is crucial at a time when unity, fraternity, and solidarity are needed. Of course, we may have different political views and positions, but I believe that we can demonstrate the virtue of acting in solidarity when it comes to the national interests of our country and our nation, said Erdoğan. Erdoğan stressed that he knows the situation of all of our municipalities without party separation. We have never forgotten the fact that political conflicts are temporary and the services provided to our country and cities are permanent. No one doubts that we will act with the same understanding from now on, he said. Erdoğan further criticized Metropolitan Mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, for firing employees working in different municipal departments in the city earlier this month. Last week, İmamoğlu lined up row upon row of vehicles rented by the previous ruling party administration in a move to highlight the scale of the AKP's wasteful spending, something he vowed to pursue when stepping into office.
The Supreme Court of Appeals ordered the release of 6 former employees of Cumhuriyet newspaper who were jailed on terrorism-related charges. The journalists were greeted by supporters and family upon their release on September 12.
The journalists released are Hakan Kara, Mustafa Kemal Güngör, Güray Öz, Önder Çelik, Bülent Utku, and caricaturist Musa Kart. They had been sentenced to less than 5 years in jail. The newspaper's former accountant Emre İper, whose sentence was approved, will continue to stay behind bars. Caricaturist Musa Kart made a statement for the press after the release. It is hard to live in countries that lost the sense of humor. It is also hard to live in countries where everything is humor. We are experiencing a period where everything is humor. It can also be seen in our case file. In modern states of law, people are first tried and then penalized. For us, it was the exact opposite. After staying arrested for 9 months in Silivri prison, we were able to appear before the judge. The journalists were accused of supporting the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, the banned leftist Revolutionary People's Liberation Party Front, the network of US-based Islamic preacher Fethullah Gülen, who is said to be behind the failed 2016 coup. The journalists had been in and out of jail for more than 2 years since being sentenced. They were briefly freed while appealing their convictions, which were upheld in February by a court in Istanbul. They were then returned to Kandıra prison near Istanbul to serve the rest of their sentences.
A court ruled for a verdict of acquittal for the first time in the trial of the academics for peace, who have been charged with propagandizing for a terrorist organization for having signed the declaration entitled, "We will not be a party to this crime."
A group of 10 academics appealed their convictions, and on July 26th, Turkey's Constitutional Court ruled that the legal proceedings had violated the signatories' freedom of expression. The court also ruled that the applicants shall be paid 9,000 liras of compensation. The rights violation shall be removed, and a copy of the decision shall be sent to local courts for retrial. According to the ruling, local courts shall rule for a retrial in the continuing and finalized cases. The courts of appeal shall overturn sentences. As a result of this ruling, a total of 37 academics have been acquitted since September 2nd, with 3 of them being in Diyarbakır, 32 in Istanbul, and 2 in Izmir. So far, 795 Turkish academics of more than 2,000 signatories were put on trial in separate cases. 204 have been sentenced and 7 have served time in prison. Nearly all of the prosecuted academics were dismissed from their positions and barred from seeking work in their fields as well as traveling abroad.
The Turkish Central Bank on Thursday lowered its one-week repo rate 325 basis points.
The bank's policy rate, also known as the one-week repo rate, fell from 19.75% to 16.5%. The decision came in a statement from the bank's Monetary Policy Committee meeting, the 6th of 8 meetings scheduled for 2019. On Tuesday, a group of 18 economists surveyed by Anadolu Agency forecast an average drop of 250 basis points in the one-week repo rate, with the lowest estimate at 175 basis points and the highest at 375.
Turkey beats Andorra and Moldova in Euro 2020 football qualifiers.
Turkey defeated Andorra with a 1-0 win on Saturday and Moldova with a 4-0 win on Tuesday in the Group H of the Euro 2020 qualifiers. During the game with Andorra, which took place in Istanbul, Turkey scored a goal in the 89th minute with Ozan Tufan's header. As for the goals during the Moldova game, Cenk Tosun scored in the 37th minute, while Deniz Turuç gave Turkey an insurance goal with a long-distance free kick in the 57th minute. Cenk Tosun added another in the 79th minute with a header. Yusuf Yazıcı had the last goal of the match in the 88th minute and sealed the 4-0 victory. Turkey increased its points total to 15 and sits atop the standings.
The Odunpazarı Modern Museum opened its doors in Eskişehir on September 7. The museum was inaugurated by President Erdogan, whose painting of the Arabic letter W is also part of the museum's exhibition.
The museum, located in the central Anatolian district of Odunpazarı, was designed by the famous Japanese architectural firm Kengo Kuma and Associates. Along with art exhibitions, the area will be host to many training programs, seminars, and meet and greets with celebrities and workshops. It has 9 galleries, all in different shapes and sizes, and a terrace for grand sculptures. Apart from the museum, the area includes a cafe, a commercial store, and workshops. The first exhibition of the museum is called Vuslat. Curated by Haldun Dostoğlu, the exhibition will embody special works from private collection of Erol Tabanca, founder of the museum. At the opening ceremony, President Erdogan drew the Arabic letter Wow, symbolizing the connection between God and man on an empty canvas. Later, the painting was exhibited in the museum.
The Contemporary Istanbul 2019 Art Fair opened its doors to the public on September 12. It will be running until September 15. Medyascope correspondent Fatima Çelik reports from Lütfi Kırdar International Convention and Exhibition Center.
The annual Art Fair of Turkey Contemporary Istanbul just opened its doors at Lütfi Kırdar Congress Center. 14th edition of the fair hosts 74 galleries from 23 countries and more than 1,400 artworks. The fair is taking place between September 12 and 15th. There is also an exhibition created by Hasan Bülent Kahraman entitled Recent Acquisitions. In this exhibition, works by 42 Turkish collectors can be seen. Through the selection, it's possible to get a hint on tendencies, directions, preferences and discoveries of collectors in Turkey. Also, there is an important collaboration with Art Orame, which is the first international art fair in southern France for GIF dialogues. Within this context, the two fairs organize a series of lectures with the theme of Mediterranean horizons. Collectors, artists and stakeholders discuss the concept of belonging to the Mediterranean extending from the past into the future. Entrance fee of the fair is 120 lira and students' fee is 80 lira during the weekend. Tickets are on the sale on Fairground. Fatima Çelik, Medyascope, Istanbul.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m.